Well, hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into the Odd Thoughts podcast. We like to talk about the everyday odd thoughts, have conversations about the relatable topics, and just discuss whatever comes to mind here at the Odd Thoughts podcast. My name is Gunther, and I am your host, and welcome to episode 16. For episode 16, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of being the last person on Earth, kind of see how that would be like. And then I wanted to transition a little bit into the idea of isolation, isolating yourself, whatever that may mean. And then I wanted to end it a little on kind of something I want to try, something new. I wanted to react to an article that I read. Nothing crazy. It was just 12 things that are seen as classy when you're wealthy, but then seen as like trashy when you're poor. So I thought that would be kind of fun to react to. So if you want to listen to any of that, then stick around. I appreciate you listening. Please enjoy. But before we get into anything else, I just want to ask how everybody's doing. I hope y'all are doing okay. I really do. I hope y'all are at peace right now. Just at least at peace in this moment. While you're sitting down listening to the podcast, whatever you're doing right now, I hope everything is calm. I know that peace kind of rides that fine line with chaoticness. It's kind of a whim from day to day, right? It's not like you can always predict that kind of thing. I know I don't often always experience peace, and I definitely don't know what it kind of looks like. I know that there's peaceful people in my life and things that keep me calm and make me feel good. But I feel I most revel in chaoticness, right? But I do know that there are times when I don't feel so chaotic, when my feelings and my emotions don't hit so hard. So I know that there are moments of calmness. And maybe that's what peace looks like. Peace can be so different for people, and being at peace can be different for everybody. So I just tried to hope for those moments of calm. And I hope you do too. And like I said, I hope that while you're listening to this podcast, I hope you feel a little calm. I know I'm doing okay. I'm glad that the weather is getting a little bit cooler. I have not liked I don't like that summer heat. And I kind of don't like the misleadingness of it being October, but we kind of get hit with these 90-degree days, you know what I'm saying? I guess I don't know really when fall starts. It's kind of in Texas, it's kind of whenever it wants to. But I just kind of I hope for those at least right now I'm hoping for the mid to low 80 days. We'll work on getting those at least, and then we'll go lower. We'll see how that goes. And then when it gets into the 40s, I'll complain then. But I'm gonna enjoy the nice weather as it comes, as I hope everybody else does. I know that I've kind of been trying to get into trying to get outside more. I just don't go outside very often. So I've been trying to figure out things that I think would be kind of fun, especially as the weather's getting nicer. I think there's certain things that are just easier for me to do in a nicer weather. I love golfing, so golf is something that I definitely want to get back into. And now that I've had kind of a wrist injury for the last couple of years that I've kind of dealt with, and so I'm trying to save my wrist for golf. I've decided that that's what I'm gonna risk it on. I heard it, I've heard it so many different ways. It's just weak. I just got a weak wrist. Can't help it. Born that way, I guess. I can work on it, I suppose. But yeah, I think everybody is feeling the weather getting nicer is nice. It's a better thing. Hopefully we get a little rain too. Keep getting a little rain. I know the other morning we got a little rain and that was nice. It definitely cools everything down when you get a little rain. So it's something, especially in Texas when it's so dry. You hear about that even like still into October, we got droughts. It's like, dang, you kind of hope for that transition in weather. So the lower temperatures are feeling real nice. That's for sure. Yeah, but anyways, episode 16. Um I appreciate all the feedback I've gotten so far on my podcast. I'm trying to become more comfortable with it. I'm trying to update my intro too, or like try to do a different intro. I want to keep them short, but I still want to make sure I do kind of a proper, like a little bit of something. I don't want it to feel like too abrupt. I think that's kind of where I kind of struggle thinking that I think I don't want it to be too short, but also I don't want to ramble too much. But then I don't want to feel like a robot. So I'm trying to mix up my intro. At least try to have like certain like points that I want to like hit, or like at least I want to know I want to say this in the intro and do this in the in the intro. So trying to hit on those more so, and not try to think like super scripted, which maybe will throw me off a couple times, but hopefully I can just get used to it. But yeah, so like I said, like I was saying earlier, I wanted to talk a little bit. The first thing I wanted to talk about was the idea of being the last person on Earth. I don't know like where the idea kind of came from. I think yeah, I don't know. I really don't know, but it's a really big question. It's something that ever since I was a kid I've kind of thought of, right? I know that it kind of is more tempting when you're younger. It's kind of like, oh man, what would I do and stuff like that. As an adult, it kind of feels it feels a little lonelier. Sometimes I don't want to be around people, but it definitely feels a little lonely. So it's funny to think that like I know that at first, as I think as I could speak as an adult, I know that at first it would be peaceful. For sure, it would be peaceful. And I know that I could probably find some fun things to do. I think the most things like I think of that like when I think about people inhibiting me as which doesn't really happen. I mean, I'm free to do whatever I want, but when I think about it, I just think like, what could I freely do? It's like, what, just like walk around naked? I that'd be a little weird. I think I would just still feel uncomfortable. I just like would still feel weird that like I'm just freely exposed to the air. But I would do like I would just do random things. Like just like try to drive any different type of car I could think of or something like that. Just like walk into people's houses just to see what's up. Not to like use anybody's stuff or anything like that, just to see how people are living. I'm a little nosy, I guess, in that way. Not gonna lie. I don't want to. It's like I still don't want to be super intrusive. It's like what? Then there's no point of doing much else. It's like because there's things that would be kind of dangerous. Like I can go exploring, yeah. If there's no, and again to think maybe if there's no people, are there no animals? That's that because in my ideal scenario, I'm just like the one being on Earth. Because I don't know if I can handle just wild animals just hanging out. I'm not an animal person. I think one thing I would try to do is I would try to like travel. You'd kind of have a free range a little bit. Just like take like car hop from state to state. At least try to do that first. Think about trying to like because that's something I want to do now. Is I want to like travel the U.S. and see small town U.S. more so. I think it's cool to see the cities, but I get a lot of like the city experience living next to Dallas. Dallas is a huge city. So I don't really need like to see different cities. Some of them are cool. I've been to Chicago, so I know Chicago's cool and I want to go to New York. I mean, for sure. I've been out to LA, so I know it's cool out there. But I want to see like small town, like USA. So I think if there was nobody else, it would be pretty free. And I could just like, yeah, I could just literally car hop. Or I'd just take like an RV. I would just like have to know how to like navigate. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, that'd make you think about the infrastructure too. That's kind of spooky. Because, I ain't no electrician. I don't know much about anything in that kind of scenario. So ideally, you would hope that the power stays on, but that's going to shut off eventually. Things won't be upkept and, food, obviously, the food sources will start to run out. So then, then it gets then you start to think like, then you start to get a little doomsday. But hopefully, like, I can learn some cool skills before then. Before things to start, I don't know what hecticness would maybe look like, but maybe I can learn a few skills. Learn how to fly a plane or something like that. That'd be scary and obviously super dangerous. Obviously you need the idea of learning is you have an expert that teaches you. Not all the time, not for everything, but for a plane that would be most useful. So I guess I get by a little bit first, right? Just like I think about it, I think it's like it'd be like a video game. I'm trying to think of it like a video game that I could just like hop into a plane and even like if I know nothing how to like start it or anything, I just would be able to like take off. I'd just be exploring, I think. That'd be my big thing. That's what I feel like most interested in. If I was the last person on Earth, I would just want to see what's up. A boat I can navigate a little easier. So to get across the seas, it would take a long time on a boat, but I think I could feel a little more at ease navigating on a boat. Maybe that's like my confidence a little bit, like a little overconfidence. Well, I don't know. Yeah, but that's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to learn skills. I could go to the library and I don't have to check out books. I could just sit there and hang out. I could just like I think I'd destroy things too. I'm not a chaotic person. I'm not like a destructive person, but I have like a destructive mind. I would just like smash shit. Sorry for my language. I would just smash things for like no reason. Just break things. Just destroy. Just conquer and destroy. But eventually everything would get pretty boring, I would imagine. After you've, kind of smashed out a few car windows and you've tried on a few different clothes and you've seen a few different people's houses and stuff like that, I'm sure that it'd get boring eventually. Especially thinking about like the loneliness, like there's something to human interaction. I think it's when you think about you're always around people and then separating yourself from people, it's nice, but then to think that nobody will ever then show up again is kind of frightening. So it would definitely be lonely. And you would be walking around just like hoping that you'd find someone or just hoping that someone would pop up. Also think about like how everybody disappeared. Start to really start to really analyze that. Be like like 28 days later where you just like woke up from a coma and just like walked out in the streets and it's dead empty. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, think about like if people are diseased and everybody just died off and somehow you're the one immune person. Start asking questions like that, or like maybe like in your little area there's nobody, but like there's zombies. It's not what I try to think. Obviously, if you're the last person, the idea is there's no bodies, no nobody. But then that's scary to be the one living person. You know what I'm saying? Or the one, un what? The one, yeah, living, I guess, because undead would be then you're a zombie because you were dead, then you went undead. Whatever, technicalities. But I would or like nuclear war, right? And be like a Fallout situation. As much as I love the Fallout games, I don't think I could handle that. I don't think I could handle the radiation, the mutations of all the stuff on the land. I do love those games too, but I don't want to live in the I don't want to live in Fallout. I definitely don't want that. So and then I think that you'd be like the last person. So you don't have that. You don't have like a legacy to guess really leave. You could like plaster like your name everywhere, but nobody theoretically will come to see it unless you know thousands of years in the future. Some traveling Martians or beings from another galaxy or something comes across this desolate planet. Kind of makes you think that like maybe that there are like planets out there already like that have been long abandoned. That's like the whole idea behind like Mars, right? Or like some conspiracy theorists think that like we're from Mars originally, or the human race, or whatever. Yeah, that's a cool. That's a fun thing to think about. I think it's a little silly to think that like we're the only intelligent beings in the universe, in all of the universe, all of space. I don't know if I want to meet any of them though. I don't know what I would ask. Just like ask if they got. Do y'all got Wi-Fi on your planet? Dude, y'all got Starbucks? Y'all got Teslas? Dude, yeah, it's just I don't know. I really don't know. Yeah, but to think that you would die eventually being the last person on Earth, it's the loneliness is killing me. You know what I'm saying? Brittany had it right. She really did. Dumb. I'm sorry. Sorry for being dumb. But I just don't think I could. The isolation. I don't think I could handle being alone for that long. I do appreciate like I said, I appreciate the isolation when it comes to me choosing it sometimes. But the idea to think that then like nobody exists around you is tough to think. If you never knew of other people's existences, then I guess it doesn't really matter, but you definitely would miss like your family and your friends and the people at least you saw in your every day to day life at work or whatever. Yeah, but isolation is a pretty common thing. Obviously, like we're not everybody's the last person on earth type scenario, not in that kind of isolation, but everybody isolates a little bit. I think it's think sometimes there is multiple purposes behind isolating too. It's hard to say that there's one reason you isolate. I know that sometimes it is a personal choice though, right? I feel like most of the time when I'm isolating, I kind of isolate myself intentionally. I self isolate. And that's for a multitude of different reasons. I don't think I can really ever hang it on one thing. Sometimes I know that I'm just like, sometimes I get emotional at things, and so sometimes I got to separate myself and isolate from people. Sometimes isolation is kind of just doing things on your own more so. I think that's kind of like it being inevitably you're gonna have to be on your own, and whether you chose it yourself or not, that is a tough thing to sometimes deal with, and definitely maybe a little tougher when you feel like you're being isolated by others. I think I think that comes with a lot of thinking like thoughts of thinking of being unwanted or not being likable. But that's hard to say that when people, like I say, it's hard to say they have this intent of malice behind isolating you. Sometimes things just don't involve you. And that's something I think I really do. Like I think I try to think about more. I know that I'm not always wanted by everybody, but I know that there are people that want me. I know that my family loves me and my friends love me, and so I know that there are people that want me. But I also know that I'm not always going to be people's cup of tea. So if I'm isolated by a certain situation or by certain people, I kind of just don't try to take it too offensively. It's hard when you know that people love you and they do it for a reason. There's got to be a reason. At least that's kind of what you hope is there's a reason. Sometimes it's a no good reason. There's no reason behind it. But that's a judgmental thing. I think it's kind of closed-minded to just immediately isolate yourself or having been isolated by someone. I think it's a little close-minded. I know that sometimes with my self-isolation, I think it really leads to being like, I don't think sometimes belong in a certain situation. Sometimes I think like people don't want to be around me or something like that. So then I kind of isolate. I kind of delusional. I have like it's hard to. I don't ever want to say delusional because it makes me feel like I'm dumb or something like that. I'm not dumb for feeling a certain way. It's just I sometimes just have these predetermined thoughts. I convince myself so hard that isolating is the best option. At times it is, like I said, at times it is the best option. I know that I'm not. I know that sometimes I'm a little hard to deal with, and I know that sometimes I'm in a certain headspace that I don't think I can handle being around certain people. So it's best to isolate. But I don't think when people do it to you, I don't think that's the tell all of your likability or you being wanted. It's just not at that moment. Sometimes it is a moment to moment thing. Not everything involves you. And with your personal life, it doesn't involve others sometimes. So you got to really sometimes think about it in that terms. So you got to sometimes just think about trying to handle a certain thing, just trying to handle yourself at the end of the day. And that could be a tough thing to do. So isolating seems like it's a safe thing to do. But not everybody's good with dealing with themselves when they're by themselves. I often am a overthinker, I think. I am a thinker think. Sorry. But I do tend to overthink 100%. And I get those dreaded thoughts about myself. I think I sometimes portray an undesirability or I portray a inability to handle certain situations by isolating myself. Then I don't ever like deal with things. Then that's when the negative comes through. I think sometimes you need engagement with others. You kind of need to involve with others and to involve yourself in certain situations. You got to do it on your own at times too. So the idea is that even if you're involving people, it's still never gonna like fully. They're never gonna. How do you never expect them to fully be there for you? You got to deal with stuff on your own. But the idea is that you don't always have to be alone doing it. So you don't always have to think about isolating yourself in the sense of trying to just be your own person. Sometimes being your own person does involve other people. As long as you're not negatively outwardly affecting others. I think it's important not to step in other people's paths, right? As you would wish that nobody steps in your path. Sometimes intervention does happen though. You can't and if intervention happens and sometimes you're aware that maybe you need help. I know that sometimes I separate myself and I isolate myself thinking that I can deal with certain problems. That it's best that I am not around and I'm emotional on my own. That I'm trying to do my thing, my own stuff on my own. Like I'm trying to pay my own bills and I'm trying to work, on my own job and I'm trying to do these things. But I don't think I always know what it looks like to work through things, to progress or process into progress. Sorry. I just don't know what it always looks like. So if I isolate myself, then I'm not really doing much. I have my little self research, I guess, at times, a little self reflect, but it doesn't always lead to something positive. Truly, like I said, I don't always know what it looks like, and so when I do talk to others, and I do tend to unisolate myself. I do find that I get to learn things. There is stuff out there to help you. Sometimes just putting yourself in a different headspace. People have opinions and they may have relatableness to you, but it doesn't mean it's going to help you. But I think it is an important thing to sometimes try to listen. I try to go into things thinking that I'm not always right. I don't ever want to try to prove myself wrong to make myself look stupid or something like that, but I got to know that sometimes I don't have all the facts or the truths that I have on myself aren't necessarily um what am I trying to say? The truths are kind of bottomless. I kind of just have these ideas in my head, and because I've never been told differently, and because I've never actually tried to get help for something, I just kind of believe them as the ultimate truth. I think like a lot of times through isolation, and I'm not really working through things like that. And but sometimes you do, like I said, sometimes you do have to separate yourself, and there's probably a purpose for isolation. There's a variety of it. 100%. I think everybody can really think of multiple reasons to isolate. I know that I think I self isolate more than anything, and I sometimes feel that when I'm not included in things and when people aren't really interacting with me, I think it's like I do feel like it's an inflicted isolation, but it's never really the case. Sometimes that self isolation portrays a picture of you wanting to be that way, wanting to be left alone. Quite often I kind of portray that. I'm in my room and I kind of do my own thing, and I tell people I'm okay and stuff like that. But so I'm not really doing much. But then like by myself and I'm not doing much with that. So I think I'm doing myself a disjustice sometimes. But there is this idea that it's nice to have that isolation when things are so chaotic. There's kind of a cool thing, like especially when I felt like I was working so much and I was working like 60 hours a week or something like that. I'd get home and I was separated from that world. Working home always felt pretty separate to me. So that was a kind of an isolation that really helped. I didn't really have to think about work, but the problems of work would then just be there for me the next day. But I think it was best that when I got home, I kind of turned off the work thing. And it's very much so something I think I kind of carry over with in like today's day and age. I think sometimes like I don't really want to talk about work. I know that people have problems at work and that's a lot of people's lives is work. I just don't I just think there's life outside of that. I try to do my best to isolate that. Try to isolate the problems away from each other, you know what I'm saying? My home problems, my home problems, my work problems, my work problems. But isolation is a complicated thing, and sometimes you do it to yourself unintentionally. And sometimes it's good to have the whereabouts to do it. Sometimes you can't handle a certain situation, or You just feel like you can't be around things and around people or whatever. So isolation helps. But long-term isolation, I think, is where it hurts. Eventually, after time, you're just separated from everything. Never, not everybody has that whereabouts of knowing how to work through things. Don't know how to ask the right questions. Don't know how to have the right answers. Even if there is a right answer or not, that's always a big thing. Is like, I don't think there's really any right answers to anything. Just rephrase the question differently. That's kind of the idea. But yeah, but I try my best to like, I try my best to isolate myself when it's necessary. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I keep trying to like figure out how to transition to a third topic, but I'm just, it's like, I'm like lost. I don't know how to transition. All right. So, well, the third topic I want to talk about, I'm trying to do my best to be so smooth. I really am. Like the first two, I kind of transitioned into like, talked about the last person on earth, talked about isolation, kind of transferred into to each other a little bit, talk a few minutes. But that I want to start trying to throw in some reactions to articles. I'm always up on my laptop or on social media reading different articles, reading different stories or whatever. So I kind of wanted to start to try to react to some. That I think is a good way to talk a little bit more about like relatable topics, I think a little bit. I think it's always stuff that's real world and I try to do my best. And also try to do something that I'm interested in. Something that I find that would be kind of a fun thing. Maybe not necessarily fun, an interesting thing to talk about. Just discuss whatever comes to mind. But yeah, I was up on my laptop and I was like looking through all the different news articles that like come up on like my homepage and stuff like that. And I noticed that one of the outlets was Wealthy Nickel. That was the name of it. And they had an article that said 12 things that seem classy when you're wealthy, but then it seems trashy when you're poor. And I thought about it and kind of was reading along and was like, a lot of those make sense. There was a few that were kind of maybe a stretch to me, or I feel like were a little vague, so I didn't include those in my notes, but some of them kind of made sense. I felt like it was a really kind of a cool article. It was really short and it just kind of pointed out it kind of pointed it very to the point. And it was written by Stephanie Allen is the woman that wrote it. I'll try to put a link into the description. I'll try to do my best to do that. Just because I think sometimes it's better to read it on your own. And maybe that's like a different interpretation. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, but so number one on the, it said, yeah, so number one on the article was taking government money. And I thought that was kind of a funny thing. I think sometimes I read about like, excuse me, sorry. Sometimes I read about like, these big businesses or banks getting like loans, like government bailouts and stuff like that. And you think about like, wow, they're $1 billion companies or they're $1 billion industries, and you're wondering why they need bailouts. You wonder why they need assistance. You're making all that money, but still you need assistance. And also things like tax cuts and like protected government funding. I know that we need business to kind of help operate the world, and unfortunately, the insider trading of politicians and in business and stuff like that. It's kind of an unfortunate reality that we live in, but it's a very real thing. But then when you look on the other end of things, when it comes to maybe you're poorer or you're not as wealthy and you're taking government money, it's kind of you're seen as maybe it's seen as a guilty thing. Some people make it to be embarrassing. But not everybody can pay their bills or sufficiently. You may work a couple jobs, you know? You may be doing as much as you possibly can, but you need a little extra help. There should be no shame too of taking government assistance at times. I will sit here and admit though that there are individuals that will abuse that system. It's kind of part of the system that you built that we don't really ask the questions. Now I can't sit here and say that I know what questions to ask, and I don't think am a purveyor in saying who deserves government funding and not. So maybe these billion-dollar industries do. Maybe they deserve the money. Maybe they need it. But it feels like that the people of America, no matter how well off you are necessarily, you hope that the wealthier individuals don't abuse that kind of system, but sometimes you need a little extra. We realize that sometimes that 40K that you rake in isn't enough to take care of yourself and your husband or your wife or your kids and stuff like that, and your kids or whatever. It's expensive. Inflation is real right now. So, like I said, I don't know who deserves the money. I can't say that. I would like a little extra money every month, but I also feel like there's people that deserve it a little more or that need it more so. Yeah, but that was a really good first one, I thought. That was so funny to think. I think about it all the time. I feel like you hear about it often. Yeah, so number 2 on the list, which is kind of a funny one that I don't think I've kind of really ever thought about, but it said little to no furnishings, like sparse furniture, like having not a lot of furniture in your home. When you're wealthy, it's kind of seen as like a minimalism look. Oh, I just a minimalist. I just have the things that I need. The one couch, the one TV. It's kind of seen as like a luxury thing, even though, you still got a bigger house. And, if you think about all the couches you have and all the little minimal, furnishings and products you have that are probably large, adds up to a large sum. And I think it's funny that would be a choice. When I think about being wealthy, I think about like not necessarily having the biggest house, but filling my house with all the coolest things. I want my house to be like, I always want my house, like, if I had a lot of money and I built my own home, I would have it be like a really practical type house where it's not like a smart house where it's electronics, not like that at all. Where it's practical, where it has things like, garden around it or something like that, or it's like, or inside the house, there's certain things that just make sense. I guess I don't really have like the list right now, but there's things I think I could probably think of when it came to that time. But when you're on the other side and you're not as wealthy and you're poor or whatever, when you don't have a lot of furniture, it's seen as like kind of a bad thing. It's like it's kind of like, oh man, they're struggling. They only got one couch and a TV, and they only got two chairs at the dining room table, and the kids have to share a big queen size bed. It's like, yeah, I mean, okay, you can see it as that, and maybe more furniture would make it better for some families, but not some families don't really need that. Sometimes the furniture really isn't that important, right? Kind of seems like that's like the last thing. Yeah, it's nice to have like a good bed to sleep on, but I would rather have just a roof over my head, right? It's cool to have a couch and to have people sit down and relax every day, but as long as like I know that I have power and I have running water, I think that's pretty important. Find that a little more important. But you can't blame people for also wanting a lot of furniture too. Sometimes I think, I've seen poorer people that just like stuff their houses with things they get from other people or things they find on the side of the road or something like that. I think that's just like a smart thing, though. It's not even like a poor thing. It's also, maybe you can even say that the idea of like upscaling furniture, if you're wealthy and you got money, it's kind of like, oh, that's cool. You're being savvy. But then if you're like poor, it's seen as like, what, you can't just buy a new, table. You can't just buy a new bookshelf. It's like, no. It's like, especially if you know you can like spruce something up and make it something kind of newish or at least functional. Why not do that? I think about that all the time. I know that my older sister, Cara, is really into that. She always, she's so, her eye, she got hawk eyes for that kind of stuff. Making sure she's looking for the right type of stuff. She finds it, man. But I thought that was kind of interesting. The sparse furnishings, you know what I'm saying? And then number 3 on the list, it said people taking care of your kids. So like nannies and babysitters and stuff like that. And I that one hit a little bit hard too. I get that maybe when you're a little bit better off or whatever, that maybe your time is more occupied, just as maybe when you're struggling, your time is more occupied. You're working a little bit more or whatever. But it seems that when you're I think it maybe almost is flipped a little bit. That if you're rich and you got someone taking it, that's where it kind of flips the judgment a little bit on its head. When someone's wealthy and they got like a nanny taking care of their kids, maybe that's more seen as kind of lazy. You're like, maybe it's just me. I try not to be judgmental with that kind of stuff, and I know that some people who are wealthy, I mean, there's a reason that you probably got that money, right? And it may be because you put a lot of work in. So the nanny is probably pretty important. And I think it probably has a lot of relief to know that there is another eye on your kid. But it sometimes I sometimes look at it and I say like, oh, what, you got all this money so you don't have to take care of your kid or whatever? That nanny's probably not always around, right? So the parents will probably inevitably have to take care of that kid. And that's just probably not a good judgment for me to have or for anybody to have. But then when you see like, when someone's a little poorer or less well off, it's maybe seen as like, oh, it maybe could be more seen as like, oh, they're working hard, they're trying. Oh, they got a couple jobs, bless their heart. I'll do anything for them. They're busting ass. Sorry for my language. Maybe it could be seen as lazy. Maybe it could be seen as like, oh, what are you doing? Like you're just like pawning your kids off to someone else. Like you ain't doing nothing. You ain't rich. You ain't thriving like that. Another pretty judgmental, closed-minded way to look at things. But I think I thought that was pretty funny because I think that kind of maybe, at least in my mind, flipped the idea of it seeming more trashy on the wealthy side and a little more classy on the poorer side. But I think it's not a shameful thing to have babysitters. Sometimes you need a little bit independent time. Sometimes it's the freedom of the time that helps the most. You may not know necessarily what's going to happen in that time that nanny or that babysitter is taking care of your kid. If you know that the kid's being taken care of well, then that helps with the flow of what can happen, especially if you're expecting something. I can understand the wealthy, mom and dad or the dad and dad, the mom and mom that are on calls all the time. Or they're kind of, it's always on a whim. Maybe they're registered nurses or they're call-in nurses or something like that. So then you really understand why the nanny's pretty purposeful. Sorry, and some of them get taken care of pretty well. Even like live in the house, you know what I'm saying? Go on vacations with them. And so, but even like on the other end of like babysitters, if you just got no time and you're working two jobs and you just like, and maybe you finally got a day off even, and it's not even just like the struggle of trying to manage like work time. Maybe you and your partner just need a little time off. Just need to go out to dinner. Need to go see a movie or something like that. Should be no shame in the babysitter. Yeah, so that was number three. I'll do a couple more. I think number four is kind of lame. Number five, it said this one was kind of I think was kind of cool, and I think this is one that I think most people actually kind of use as the argument of if you're wealthy, it's classy. If you're poor, it's trashy. So number five, it had weathered clothing, or it also had vintage clothing. That's another thing, kind of, right? It feels like at one time with thrifting old clothes or whatever was actually kind of a good way to save money. It was kind of a good way to repurpose things that have already been worn and already been used by people, but then it got expensive. Then a bunch of rich people were willing to pay whatever for nothing kind of thing and then it became a trend. So now you still find, I think, 100% you still find thrift shops and thrift stores that are very true to the nature of that kind of eclecticness and keeping it cheap, and it is a hand me down, so I won't overcharge you for it. But you will never get the upcharge stuff. It's not even upscaled. And I think that's kind of a problem thing is like, the weatheredness of the clothes. Like richer people kind of look at it and they say, "Oh, this is vintage, someone wore this. This is what it's supposed to look like." But it's kind of it is a hand-me-down. You just paid $100 for a t-shirt that probably cost $10 back in 94. It's kind of funny. But then you look at like poorer people. You look at them when they've been wearing stuff since the early 2000s. They got t-shirts that they got a polo shirt that their daddy used to wear or something like that. Maybe a little more judgmental. Especially like, sometimes people don't have the availability of having every single cool piece of clothing they want. You got to go to the Goodwill. You wait for the hand-me-downs. I didn't get hand-me-downs as much as a kid because I was kind of we went to Goodwill and Walmart and Target and stuff like that, but my parents cared a little bit about that. That was one thing that I think they really tried to ball out on a little bit. I guess I could say ball out. But I was wearing like Old Navy and stuff like that, Gap, you know what I'm saying? New shoes. I didn't really have new clothes every year, because I would try to like you get a little big one year, get them a little big one year, and then just kind of grow into it over the next couple years. But new shoes I needed. But yeah, I think so often I'm used to that. I'm used to seeing like people wear the hand me downs though, wear clothes that they've been wearing for a minute. My dad still wears t-shirts that he's been wearing since the early 2000s. And I don't look at it as like a if trashy or even if they're weathered. Yeah, they got a little character to them, but that's what happens when you wear a shirt a lot. That's what happens. So I think that is but I do think that's kind of funny to think that like you got like for rich people, it's seen as like a cool thing. You drop $100 on a old T-shirt, whereas someone else is like, oh, I just need anything. So they'll take that T-shirt for nothing. It could have 10 holes in it. It doesn't matter, or jeans or whatever. So I thought that was kind of a cool thing. I thought, or keep saying all of them are cool, but all of them are. I just thought it was. They really do. It's and I think that's a pretty prime example, or at least like the number one example I think people use when it comes to that comparison of trashy versus classy. Yeah, so I'll do one more. Um, living in a hotel. I thought that one was a kind of a good one too. If it's a hotel where the room is like a couple hundred a night, it's not a problem. Stay there a couple months at a time. Who cares when you got the money? But then if it's at the Motel 6 or something like that, or the Super 8 or whatever, then it seems it's like more trashy. But I just like, that's just like, that's so weird to think that way. I don't think either way, it shouldn't be viewed as a weird way. If you want to live in a hotel, you do your thing. There are 100% amenities that come with living in a hotel. Some hotels got gyms. Some hotels do a continental breakfast in the main lounge every day, They got swimming pools. So that's the nice things to think about. Yeah, and I think I don't know too often about living in a hotel. I know a few years ago there was a pipe that bursted in my house and we had to stay at a hotel for a couple weeks and it's fine. It felt all right. Definitely was okay to be at home. I think there's a luxury to be at home. I think when you think about wealthy people living in hotels, you get a little question. You kind of think about like why are you doing that? But it's got to be because of like I think it's got to be because of what they do as a job maybe. Maybe it's a luxurious thing, Maybe they like to live in a different country every few months, rent out a hotel room and just, kind of hang out for a few months everywhere. But maybe they're just like moving a lot like that. Maybe they're just always traveling and always doing something and there's a new opportunity here and there's a new opportunity here. So that's kind of how I look at it. The poorer people probably wouldn't be able to afford those hotel rooms anyways. And I don't think too often about the gatekeeping thing, right? Like I don't think anybody ever has like that's never a question. Nobody's ever saying like, "Well, I can't get that hotel room because someone lives in it." I don't think that's ever in question. Yeah, so then when you think about maybe you're not as well off and you're poor and you're living in a hotel room, it's for the same. It's there's no shame to it. It could be pretty cheap and it could definitely be it could be a temporary, you know, solution and a very good one nonetheless. I think 100% that some of them are pretty cheap. And I don't, and I wouldn't be against it, especially if you think about you're getting yourself on your feet or whatever. Maybe you just got a new job, and maybe maybe you're by yourself, or maybe you're with someone and they got a new job as well. The money doesn't always start flowing in right off the bat. So maybe the best idea is to stay in a hotel room, or maybe to bounce around kind of, and maybe you got to spend a few days in the car or whatever, and then you got enough money to spend a week or whatever. There's definitely no shame in living in a hotel, though. Honestly, I quite dig the idea. I'm not gonna lie. I'd live in a hotel, have someone kind of, if it had the right amenities, I guess. If I'm thinking about like a motel, where sometimes they don't always have like that kind of stuff. But if there's a Denny's in the parking lot and there's a 7-Eleven on the corner of the street, on the corner, you know what I'm saying, by the light, the street light, I think I'll be all right. I got everything I need. Yeah, but yeah, I just thought that article was pretty interesting. Thought it was kind of cool, and I think something that I think of. I definitely do. And a couple of those were definitely pretty prominent things about that example of what's, classy when you're wealthy and trashy when you're poor. I think it's all for in the mind too. I don't think people who are wealthy have the intention of making that stuff look classy. Maybe, stuff that can be on that borderline of trashy and classy. I don't think they mean the intention of making it look classy. I don't think they have the intention of making themselves look bad. And the same thing with poor people. I don't think or people who are not as well off. It's hard to say just poor people, make me sound snooty. Sometimes, but even like those things about like, vintage clothes, that's not a bad thing to think about. Thrifted clothes. Getting those like less expensive thing, getting hand-me-downs. I don't turn them down. I wouldn't turn them down at all. I don't new clothes are sometimes so I get so timid, timid. Sorry, tepid. I was gonna say tepid, but timid to buy clothes. I don't know what new fashion looks like, so I get a little anxious to buy stuff. But yeah, I think I want to try to start throwing in articles like that. But yeah, all right, friends. That's really all I have to say about that. Just wanted to talk a little bit about, being the last person on Earth, how that would be. Talk a little bit about isolation, self-isolation, isolating, through certain different scenarios, different situations. And then I wanted to react to an article with y'all. Something like I said, I want to try to do that a little bit more. Try to throw in a couple different things with each episode. I really do appreciate y'all for listening, though. I appreciate y'all for giving me the opportunity to say stuff on a microphone and have an audience. This episode will be up on YouTube and Spotify podcast for your enjoyment, and I make sure to do that with every single episode under the Out of Thoughts podcast. You could also follow me on different social medias. Also, like and subscribe to my podcast if you found it enjoyable or relatable at all. But like I said, you could follow me on a variety of different social medias. I have a Facebook. I go by Gunther Getlicker, which is my name. Both those G's are uppercase. I also have an Instagram that goes by Gunther underscore Getlicker. Both those G's are lowercase. And then I have a Twitter, which is at one Mike GG. Both those G's are uppercase. So I do appreciate everybody for listening. I love y'all. Just remember to show up for yourselves every single day, and most importantly, be excellent to each other.